The Nine Tales. A Kitsune's Journey Through Time. The first tale. Birth in the Mountain Forest. In the ancient mountains of Japan, where mist clings to cedar trees like silk scarves draped over noble shoulders, where streams sing their way down moss-covered stones, where the very air seems to shimmer with something beyond the merely physical. There, in a den hidden beneath the gnarled roots of a 1,000-year-old tree, a kitsune was born. The den was warm and dark, lined with soft grasses that the mother fox had gathered carefully over many weeks. Outside, cherry blossoms drifted through the spring air like snow made of petals, landing gently on the forest floor to create carpets of pink and white. Inside the den, in the comfortable darkness, 3 kits huddled against their mother's warm fur, eyes still closed, tiny bodies trembling with the newness of existence. The smallest of the 3 was different, though no one could have known this yet. Her fur was not the usual russet red of ordinary foxes but had a peculiar quality to it, a softness that caught light strangely, a texture that seemed somehow more than merely physical. When she finally opened her eyes after many days, they were not the amber or brown of normal fox kits but a deep, luminous gold that seemed to hold depths no animal eyes should possess. Her mother, an ordinary fox who had mated with what she thought was an ordinary male fox, sensed something unusual about this smallest kit but could not have understood what it meant. She cleaned the kit with her rough tongue, nudged her toward milk, protected her from the spring cold, did all the things that mother foxes have done since the beginning of foxes. And the kit, whom we shall call Yuki, meaning snow for the white that would eventually dominate her coloring, grew slowly, steadily, drinking her mother's milk and sleeping curled against her siblings' warmth. The forest where Yuki was born existed in a time when the boundary between the natural and supernatural was thinner than it would become in later ages. This was during the Heian period, around the year 850, when Japan was ruled by emperors and court nobles from the great capital of Heian-kyo, when Buddhism and Shinto coexisted and intertwined, when people still spoke of kami dwelling in every tree and stone and stream, when the world was alive with spirits and possibilities. The mountain forest itself was sacred. Local villagers from the settlements in the valley below spoke of it with reverence and a touch of fear. They came to gather mushrooms and herbs, to hunt deer and boar, to cut wood for building and for fires, but they always did so respectfully, always leaving offerings at small shrines scattered throughout the forest, always whispering prayers to the kami of the mountain, asking permission before taking anything, expressing gratitude after. These shrines were simple affairs. A few stones arranged just so, perhaps a length of woven straw rope marking the sacred space, maybe a small wooden structure no bigger than a bird's nest to shelter a paper talisman. But they served their purpose, marking the places where the boundary between worlds was particularly thin, where one might glimpse something beyond the ordinary if conditions were right and eyes were clear. One such shrine stood not far from where Yuki had been born, perhaps 100 paces upslope from the old tree that sheltered her den. It was dedicated to the mountain kami, the ancient spirit who had dwelt in these peaks since before humans came to these islands. The shrine consisted of a flat rock, naturally worn smooth, surrounded by a circle of smaller stones. A shimenawa, a sacred rope of twisted rice straw with white paper streamers, hung between 2 cedar trees, marking the boundary of sacred space. Villagers came to this shrine regularly, especially in spring and autumn, the times of planting and harvest when the favor of the kami was most needed. They brought offerings of rice, sake, vegetables from their gardens, sometimes fish from the streams. They bowed deeply, clapped their hands twice to get the kami's attention, spoke their prayers, bowed again. Some of these offerings were eaten by ordinary animals, deer, raccoon dogs, wild boar. But some, it was said, were accepted directly by the kami, vanishing overnight without trace of any creature's approach. Yuki, as she grew from helpless kit to curious young fox, began to explore the forest around her den. Her siblings were bolder, ranging farther, But Yuki moved more cautiously, her golden eyes taking in everything, her sensitive nose reading the complex stories written in scent on every breeze, her large ears swiveling to catch sounds that her siblings never noticed. She discovered the shrine when she was perhaps 8 weeks old enough to wander a short distance from the den but still returning to her mother each night. The place drew her in a way she could not understand. Standing at the edge of the sacred space marked by the Shimenawa, Yuki felt something, a tingling in her fur, a warmth in her chest, a sense of recognition though she had never been here before. Fresh offerings lay on the stone, a bowl of rice still faintly steaming and a small cup of sake. The rice smelled wonderful, rich and inviting. But Yuki did not approach. Some instinct deeper than hunger held her back. This was not food for ordinary creatures. This belonged to something else, something greater, something that resonated with the strange quality that lived within her own small body. As Yuki sat at the shrine's edge, perfectly still, something extraordinary happened. The air seemed to thicken, to take on weight and presence. The normal sounds of the forest, birdsong, insect hum, the rustle of leaves, faded to a distant murmur. And in that altered space Yuki saw. What she saw was difficult to describe in words meant for ordinary experience. The mountain kami appeared not as a solid form but as a presence, a concentration of something that filled the space around the shrine. If forced to give it shape, one might say it looked like an old man with a long white beard, dressed in robes that seemed woven from mist and moonlight. Or perhaps it looked like a magnificent stag with antlers that reached toward the sky like tree branches. Or perhaps it was simply light, pure and golden, warm without burning, bright without blinding. The kami regarded Yuki, and Yuki felt that regard like a physical touch, gentle but undeniable. In that moment of recognition, something passed between them, not words exactly but meaning, understanding, acknowledgement. Little one, the kami's presence seemed to say, though no sound disturbed the air, you are more than you seem. You are born of 2 worlds, the physical world of foxes and forests, and the spiritual world of kami and yokai. Within you lies potential that will unfold across centuries. You will grow not just in body but in wisdom and power. You will gain tales, one for each 100 years of life, until you reach the pinnacle of your kind. You will walk between worlds, serving as bridge and messenger. This is your nature, your destiny, your gift and your burden. Yuki understood, though she was only a young fox, barely weaned. The understanding went deeper than thought, settling into her very bones, becoming part of her as fundamental as the beating of her heart. Then the presence faded, the normal sounds of the forest returned, and Yuki was once again an ordinary-seeming fox kit sitting at the edge of a small shrine, watching offerings that no longer steamed. But she was changed, awakened, aware now of what she was, even if she did not yet know what that would mean. Summer came to the mountain forest, bringing warm days when cicadas sang their droning songs from every tree, when streams ran lower and slower, when the shade beneath the cedars offered cool relief from the afternoon sun. Yuki and her siblings grew larger, stronger, more independent. Their mother began teaching them to hunt, first insects and grubs, then mice and voles, eventually the skills they would need to catch larger prey like rabbits and ground-nesting birds. But while Yuki learned these skills as diligently as her siblings, she was drawn to other lessons as well. She spent long hours at the mountain shrine, sitting quietly, observing, feeling the flow of spiritual energy that ordinary creatures could not perceive. She watched villagers come with their offerings and prayers, and she began to understand the relationship between humans and kami, the exchange of respect and blessing that connected the physical and spiritual realms. One evening, as the sun set behind the western peaks and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep rose, Yuki sat watching a young woman who had come to pray at the shrine. The woman was perhaps 20 years old, dressed in simple clothing. A working woman from the village, not a noble lady. She bowed deeply, her hands pressed together, and spoke her prayer in a voice barely above a whisper. "Please, honored kami of the mountain, my mother is ill. The healer has done all she can, but the fever will not break. I know I have little to offer, only this rice from my own small bowl, and the gratitude of a humble family. But if you could see fit to spare her, to grant her a few more years, I would serve you faithfully all my days. I would come to this shrine every week with offerings. I would teach my children to honor you. Please, she is a good woman. She does not deserve to die yet." The woman's voice broke on the last words, and Yuki saw tears running down her face. The fox felt something stir within her, compassion, a desire to help that was more than animal sympathy. She stood and moved forward, stepping into the sacred space for the first time. The woman gasped, seeing the fox approach. For a moment, fear flickered across her face. Wild animals did not normally come so close to humans, especially within shrine spaces. But as she looked into Yuki's golden eyes, the fear transformed into wonder. She saw something in those eyes that was more than animal, something that recognized her pain and wanted to ease it. Yuki sat before the woman, perfectly still, maintaining eye contact. Then, slowly, deliberately, she dipped her head in a gesture that was unmistakably a nod, an acknowledgement, a promise. The woman's eyes widened further. She understood, though it seemed impossible, that this fox had heard her prayer and was somehow assuring her that it would be answered. The woman bowed deeply to Yuki, and when she raised her head, the fox was already trotting back into the forest, her single fluffy tail disappearing into the undergrowth. What happened next, Yuki did not fully understand herself, acting more on instinct than conscious thought. She ran through the forest, her paws barely touching the ground, moving faster than an ordinary fox should be able to move. She found herself drawn to a particular place, a small clearing where a certain kind of white flower grew, a plant that healers sometimes used but that was rare and difficult to find. Yuki gently gripped one of the plants in her jaws, pulling it up with roots intact. Then she ran back, not to the shrine but down the mountain path, following the woman's scent. She found the woman still making her way down the darkening trail and darted ahead of her, placing the plant across the path where it could not be missed. The woman, seeing the plant, recognized it immediately as the rare healing herb that her mother needed. She looked around, saw Yuki watching from the shadows, and understood that this was a gift, a direct answer to her prayer delivered by a most unexpected messenger. She bowed again, gathered the plant carefully, and hurried home with renewed hope in her heart. That mother recovered. The fever broke that very night after the daughter brewed tea from the herb's roots, and within a week the woman was back on her feet, weak but healing, grateful to have been spared. The daughter kept her promise, coming to the shrine every week with offerings, and she told the story of the golden-eyed fox to everyone who would listen, adding to the growing collection of tales about strange and wonderful things that happened in the mountain forest. As for Yuki, she felt something shift within her after that night, a deepening of the spiritual power she carried, a confirmation that she had chosen rightly, that helping humans would be part of her path. Her connection to the kami strengthened. She began to understand that she was meant to serve as an intermediary, a bridge between the human world and the spirit world, carrying prayers to the kami and bringing the kami's blessings to those who honored them properly. The seasons turned. Summer gave way to autumn, autumn to winter, winter to spring again. Yuki and her siblings reached full maturity. Her siblings found mates and established their own territories, living the normal span of ordinary foxes, their lives measured in years rather than centuries. But Yuki did not mate, did not establish a territory in the way ordinary foxes do. She remained near the mountain shrine, becoming a familiar sight to the villagers who climbed the mountain to worship. People began leaving special offerings for her. Aburage, fried tofu, which was said to be the favorite food of shrine foxes. They addressed prayers not just to the mountain kami but to the golden-eyed fox as well, asking for her intercession, her blessing, her help with problems both large and small. Yuki grew in size until she was noticeably larger than an ordinary fox, her fur taking on an increasingly lustrous quality, her golden eyes glowing with unmistakable intelligence. and as her first century of life approached its end, she felt a change beginning deep within her, a gathering of spiritual energy that would soon manifest in a visible, unmistakable way. On the 100th anniversary of her birth, a spring morning when cherry blossoms drifted through the air just as they had on the day she was born, Yuki sat at the mountain shrine at dawn. The rising sun painted the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. The air was perfectly still, holding its breath. And then it happened. A warmth spread through Yuki's body, concentrating at the base of her spine. Light emanated from her fur, soft and golden, growing brighter. She felt her body changing, restructuring, a process that was not painful but was certainly intense, demanding all her attention and energy. When the light faded and Yuki opened her eyes, she had two tails. Both were long and luxurious, covered in fur that was now predominantly white with touches of russet gold at the tips. They moved independently, with far more articulation and control than her original single tail had possessed. And with this physical change came an expansion of her abilities. Her senses sharper, her connection to the spiritual realm stronger, her intelligence deepening in ways that made her previous 100 years seem almost like sleep from which she was only now awakening. The second and third tails. Learning and serving. With two tails, Yuki discovered abilities that had been latent within her, waiting for this milestone to unlock them. She could now perform small acts of magic, creating illusions, moving small objects without touching them, understanding and speaking human language when she chose to do so. This last ability was perhaps the most transformative, for it allowed her to interact with humans in entirely new ways. One of the first humans she spoke to was a Shinto priest who had recently been assigned to maintain a proper shrine at the mountain. The old and formal shrine with its simple rock and shimenawa was being expanded into a more substantial structure, with a small wooden building to house sacred objects and protect visitors from weather. The priest was a young man named Takeshi, earnest and devout but still learning his duties. One evening, as he was sweeping the shrine grounds, preparing for the next day's dedication ceremony, he looked up to see a fox with two magnificent tails sitting at the edge of the clearing, watching him with golden eyes. "You honor this place with your presence, Kitsune-sama," Takeshi said, bowing respectfully. He had heard the stories about the golden-eyed fox, and he recognized immediately that this was no ordinary animal. "The honor is mine, Takeshi-san," Yuki replied, and the young priest nearly dropped his broom in shock at hearing the fox speak in clear, cultured Japanese. "I have watched over this place for 100 years. I am gladdened to see it being properly maintained. The mountain kami is pleased." "You speak," Takeshi managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I do," Yuki confirmed. "I am a servant of the kami, a messenger between worlds. I have been so since my awakening a century ago. I wish to help you in your duties, if you will accept such help from one who wears fur rather than robes." Over time, Takeshi and Yuki developed a close working relationship. The fox would appear to him regularly, offering advice, warning him of approaching weather that might endanger visitors, alerting him to problems that needed addressing. Through Yuki, Takeshi learned to be a better priest, to truly understand the relationship between humans and kami rather than simply performing rituals by rote. During these 2 centuries, her second and third 100 years of life, Yuki's fur gradually shifted from mostly russet with white patches to mostly white with russet patches, then to pure white. Her size increased until she was as large as a wolf. When her 3rd century ended and her 3rd tail emerged in another dawn ceremony of light and transformation, she was unmistakably no longer an ordinary fox but something else entirely, something recognized and revered. People began making pilgrimages specifically to see her, to ask for her blessing. The mountain shrine became famous throughout the province as a place where the kami's messenger could be seen and spoken with. Offerings piled up, not just for the mountain kami but for Yuki herself. Statues were carved in her likeness, the first of many such fox statues that would eventually grace shrines throughout Japan. Yuki took these responsibilities seriously. She interceded in disputes between villages, helping resolve conflicts over water rights and boundary lines. She blessed newborn babies, touching them gently with her nose and thereby, it was believed, granting them health and good fortune. She warned communities of coming disasters, floods, landslides, crop failures, allowing people to prepare and survive calamities that might otherwise have destroyed them. But Yuki also learned during these centuries that not all her kind used their powers so beneficently. She encountered other Kitsune, some who used their shape-shifting abilities to play cruel tricks on humans, some who took human form to seduce and manipulate for their own amusement, some who delighted in causing confusion and chaos simply because they could. One such Kitsune was a male fox spirit named Akuro, who had 7 tails and had lived for 700 years. Akuro had grown cynical and bitter over his long life, believing that humans were cruel and greedy and deserved whatever torment he inflicted upon them. He took particular pleasure in appearing as a beautiful woman, seducing wealthy merchants, convincing them to give him their fortunes, then revealing his true nature and leaving them ruined and humiliated. Yuki confronted Akuro one night in the forest, both foxes in their true forms, their multiple tails swishing with agitation. "What you do shames our kind," Yuki told him, her voice calm but firm. "You turn humans against all Kitsune, making them fear and hate us. You abuse the gifts we have been given." Akuro's eyes, red where Yuki's were gold, flashed with contempt. "Gifts? Is that what you call this curse of immortality, watching humans live and die like mayflies while we endure century after century? I was young once, like you, idealistic and eager to serve. But after 700 years, I have learned what humans truly are. They deserve no mercy. Some humans are cruel," Yuki acknowledged, "but many are kind. Many honor the kami and live good lives. And even those who are unkind, is it our place to punish them? We are messengers and intermediaries, not judges and executioners." "Speak for yourself," Akuro sneered. "I will do as I please. What will you do about it, little three-tail? Challenge me? You would lose." And in raw power this was true. A 7-tailed Kitsune commanded far more spiritual energy than a 3-tailed one. But Yuki did not back down. "I will not fight you," she said, "but I will oppose you. Every victim you make, I will help. Every lie you tell, I will counter with truth. Every human you turn against our kind, I will work to reconcile. You may have more power, Akuro, but I have something you have lost: patience, love, hope. And those are more enduring than any magic." Akuro laughed, a harsh sound like breaking branches, and disappeared into the night. But over the years that followed, he found that Yuki was true to her word. Each time he struck, she was there to mitigate the damage, to heal what he had wounded, to restore what he had taken. Eventually, frustrated by her persistent opposition, Akuro left the region entirely, moving to a distant part of Japan where Yuki's influence did not reach. This conflict taught Yuki important lessons about the duality of Kitsune nature, the potential for both great good and great harm that their powers represented. She understood that every choice mattered, that power without wisdom was dangerous, and that the path of service she had chosen required constant vigilance and commitment. The 4th and 5th Tales. The Time of Inari. As Yuki entered her 4th century, the worship of Inari Okami was spreading throughout Japan. Inari, the kami of rice, fertility, prosperity, and worldly success, had become one of the most important deities in both Shinto and Buddhist practice. And Kitsune, particularly white foxes like Yuki, were increasingly identified as Inari's messengers and servants. Yuki felt drawn to this association. The values that Inari represented, nourishment, growth, prosperity, the honest work of farmers and merchants, resonated deeply with her own desire to help humans flourish. She began spending time at Inari shrines, appearing to priests and devotees, performing small miracles that strengthened people's faith and demonstrated the kami's favor. When her 4th tale emerged at the beginning of her 5th century of life, Yuki experienced another expansion of her abilities. She could now shapeshift, taking human form, a power that was both liberating and challenging. Her preferred form was that of a young woman with long white hair and golden eyes, dressed in the white robes of a shrine maiden. In this form, she could move freely through human society, experiencing their world from within rather than observing from without. Taking human form was not simply a matter of changing external appearance. Yuki discovered that when she wore human shape, she also had to navigate human social expectations, human emotions experienced through a human body, human vulnerabilities. She had to eat human food, sleep in human ways, respond to heat and cold and fatigue as humans did. The experience was both humbling and enlightening, giving her deeper understanding of those she served. One of her most important relationships during this period was with a woman named Akiko, a skilled weaver who maintained a small workshop near an Inari shrine in the provincial capital. Akiko was talented but poor, struggling to compete with larger workshops that had more resources and connections. She prayed daily at the Inari shrine, asking for prosperity but also offering thanks for what little she had, demonstrating the gratitude and humility that pleased the kami. Yuki, in her human form, appeared at Akiko's workshop one day claiming to be a traveler seeking work. Akiko, despite her poverty, took in this apparent stranger, offering her food and shelter in exchange for help with the weaving. Over the months that followed, Yuki taught Akiko new techniques she had learned from watching human weavers for centuries. Patterns from distant regions, methods for creating dyes from local plants that produced colors more vibrant than any Akiko had achieved before, ways of organizing the work that increased efficiency without sacrificing quality. Akiko's business flourished. Her textiles gained a reputation for exceptional beauty and quality, attracting customers from throughout the province and beyond. She became prosperous, able to support not just herself but several apprentices, contributing to her community's economy and well-being. When Akiko finally learned the truth, that her helpful assistant was actually a Kitsune servant of Inari, she was not frightened but deeply moved. She understood that the kami had heard her prayers and sent help in an unexpected form. She became even more devout, and she taught her apprentices and her own children to always honor Inari and to watch for the kami's blessings, which might come in forms they did not expect. Through experiences like this, repeated across her 4th and 5th centuries of life, Yuki became known throughout the region as one of Inari's most devoted servants. Shrines began featuring statues of white foxes in her honor. Stories were told of the Kitsune who helped farmers achieve better harvests, who guided merchants to successful ventures, who blessed newlyweds with fertility and families with prosperity. When her 5th tale emerged, Yuki's power increased again, now approaching the level where she could be considered truly formidable even among Kitsune. She could create illusions so convincing that they were indistinguishable from reality. She could manipulate fire, creating the ghostly foxfire called Kitsunebi that was said to lead travelers either to safety or to peril depending on the fox's intent. She could move with such speed that she seemed to teleport, appearing in one location and then another with no visible transition. But more than these flashy abilities, Yuki gained something subtler and perhaps more valuable: a deepening wisdom, an understanding of the long patterns of cause and effect that played out across centuries, an ability to see beyond immediate appearances to the deeper truths of situations. ## the 6th and 7th tales, the era of changes. Yuki's 6th and 7th centuries coincided with times of great upheaval in Japan. The old court system was giving way to military rule under shoguns. Civil wars erupted as powerful clans fought for dominance. The country was being reshaped by violence and ambition, and ordinary people suffered tremendously. During these difficult times, Yuki found new ways to serve. She appeared on battlefields not to fight, for Kitsune served life, not death, but to guide the wounded, to help, to lead lost soldiers back to their camps, sometimes to whisper wisdom into the ears of commanders who might choose mercy over cruelty if given proper counsel. She befriended a samurai named Hiroshi who was renowned for his skill in battle but troubled by the violence he had seen and caused. Yuki appeared to him as a counselor, speaking to him in his dreams, helping him find a path that honored his duty while preserving his humanity. Through her influence, Hiroshi became known not just as a warrior but as a wise leader who sought to minimize bloodshed, who protected civilians, who worked toward peace even in times of war. When Hiroshi was mortally wounded in a battle he could not avoid, Yuki came to him as he lay dying. She took human form, appearing as a white-robed woman who sat beside him and held his hand, easing his passage from life to death. "Was I good?" Hiroshi asked, his voice barely a whisper, his life fading with each labored breath. "Did I do enough to balance the harm I caused?" "You were brave and honorable," Yuki told him gently. "You fought when you had to, protected those who could not protect themselves, and sought peace when others sought only victory. Your life had meaning and value. Be at peace, Hiroshi. The kami know your worth." She stayed with him until his final breath, then performed a small ritual to guide his spirit safely to whatever afterlife awaited him. It was one of countless small kindnesses she performed during those violent centuries, one of countless ways she used her growing power to ease suffering rather than cause it. Her sixth tail emerged on a battlefield, appropriately enough, not during active combat but in the quiet dawn after fighting had ended, as Yuki walked among the fallen, offering what comfort she could to the dying. The transformation felt different this time, tinged with the sorrow of all she had witnessed, the weight of centuries of human suffering that she had been unable to prevent though she had tried. With 6 tails, Yuki's appearance became more obviously supernatural. Her white fur seemed to glow with its own light, especially at night. Her golden eyes could be seen from great distances, shining like lanterns in the darkness. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a quality that commanded attention and respect, a harmonics that suggested the spiritual power she embodied. Her 7th century brought new challenges. Buddhism was continuing to spread and evolve in Japan, and some sects taught that Kitsune and other yokai were demons to be feared and exorcised rather than respected as part of the natural order. Yuki found herself having to prove over and over that she meant no harm, that her service was genuine, that not all supernatural beings were threats to be eliminated. She engaged in theological debates with Buddhist monks, demonstrating through logic and example that there was room in the cosmos for both Buddhist teachings and the older traditions of kami and nature spirits. Some monks remained hostile, but others became allies, recognizing that Yuki's work aligned with Buddhist principles of compassion and right action even if her nature was different from theirs. When her 7th tail emerged, Yuki felt herself approaching a threshold. With 7 tails, she was no longer simply powerful but was becoming something approaching divine. Her connection to Inari deepened until sometimes she could not distinguish between her own consciousness and the kami's presence, as if she were becoming an avatar or manifestation rather than merely a servant. She began to understand that the journey toward 9 tails was not just about accumulating power but about transcending self, about becoming less an individual and more a principle, a force, an embodiment of something greater than any single being could contain. The 8th tail. The challenge of wisdom. The 8th century of Yuki's life, her journey from 7 to 8 tails, was perhaps the most difficult. She had accumulated tremendous power, ancient wisdom, centuries of experience. But with these came a danger that had destroyed Akuro and many other long-lived Kitsune. The danger of detachment, of caring less because one had seen so much suffering that it became mere repetition, of losing empathy because one had witnessed the same foolish mistakes made generation after generation. Yuki struggled with this. She found herself becoming impatient with humans, frustrated by their short-sightedness, annoyed by their tendency to ignore the lessons of history and repeat the same errors their ancestors had made. She began withdrawing from direct interaction, observing from a distance, questioning whether her service made any real difference in the long arc of time. It was during this period of doubt that she met another ancient Kitsune, a 8-tailed vixen named Shirayuki who had walked the path before Yuki. Shirayuki found Yuki sitting alone on a mountain peak, her 7 tails wrapped around her body, staring out at the landscape below with an expression of profound weariness. "You stand at the most dangerous point in our journey," Shirayuki said without preamble, settling beside Yuki on the stone outcropping. Her 8 tails, pure white and luminous, swished gently in the mountain wind. "How do you bear it?" Yuki asked. 800 years of watching them make the same mistakes, suffer the same sorrows, die the same pointless deaths. What is the purpose? Why do we serve? Because they are worth it, Shirayuki replied simply. Not because they are perfect, they will never be perfect. Not because they always learn, they often fail to learn. But because they try. Because even knowing they will die, they love. Even knowing they will suffer, they hope. Even knowing they will fail, they strive. That courage, that stubborn refusal to surrender to despair despite their mortality, that is sacred, Yuki. That is why we serve. But we could do so much more, Yuki protested. With our power, we could reshape their societies, prevent their wars, protect them from their own worst impulses. We could, Shirayuki agreed. And in doing so, we would rob them of their agency, their growth, their essential humanity. We are not their rulers or their parents. We are their companions on the journey, their helpers when help is needed, their witnesses to testify that their brief lives matter. The challenge of the 8th tail is to accept this, to have power beyond most beings' imagining and yet to exercise it with restraint, to be capable of intervention but wise enough to know when not to intervene. This conversation, and others like it over the years that followed, helped Yuki navigate the crisis of her 8th century. She learned to love humans not despite their flaws but inclusive of them, to see their struggles as valuable rather than futile, to find meaning in small acts of kindness rather than demanding grand transformations. She returned to more direct service but with a changed perspective. Instead of trying to prevent all suffering, she focused on teaching resilience. Instead of solving every problem, she helped humans develop the wisdom to solve their own problems. Instead of rescuing everyone in crisis, she offered the tools and encouragement they needed to rescue themselves. When her 8th tail finally emerged, on a quiet evening during a light spring rain, Yuki felt not triumph but humility. She understood now that even with 8 tails, even with 800 years of life and accumulated wisdom, she was still learning, still growing, still in need of guidance herself. The power she wielded was immense, but it was meant to be used in service to something greater than herself, the intricate web of connection between all beings, the dance of life and spirit that had no beginning or end. The 9th tail. Approaching transcendence. As Yuki entered her final century before achieving 9 tails, the pinnacle of Kitsune existence, the transformation that would make her nearly divine, she felt a growing sense of anticipation mixed with something like anxiety. What would it mean to have 9 tails? Would she still be herself, or would she be so transformed as to lose the identity she had carried through 900 years? Would the power overwhelm the person she had become? During this final century, Yuki traveled throughout Japan, visiting the places that had been important in her long life. The mountain shrine where she had been born, the Inari temples where she had served, the battlefields where she had comforted the dying, the villages where she had helped communities thrive. She spoke with other ancient Kitsune, learning from those few who had already achieved 9 tails, preparing herself for the transformation that awaited. She discovered that 9-tailed Kitsune were rare, perhaps a dozen existed in all of Japan at any given time. They were treated with reverence approaching worship, for they possessed powers that made them effectively immortal and nearly omniscient within their domains. They could see across vast distances, hear prayers spoken anywhere in the country, manifest in multiple locations simultaneously, reshape reality itself within certain bounds. They were, in essence, lesser kami, bridge beings between the purely spiritual and the physical world. But Yuki also learned that achieving 9 tails came at a price. The more power one gained, the more one was drawn into the spiritual realm and away from the physical. Nine-tailed Kitsune rarely took physical form anymore, existing more as presences and principles than as individual beings with personalities and preferences. They served the cosmic order rather than individual humans, working at scales that encompassed entire regions and generations rather than single lives and moments. Some Kitsune, Yuki learned, refused the ninth tail when it began to manifest, choosing to remain at 8 tails rather than transcend into something that felt less like themselves. This was not considered failure or weakness but rather a legitimate choice, a decision to remain more personally engaged with the world even if it meant accepting less power. Yuki meditated on this choice for years. Did she want to become a nine-tailed Kitsune? Was that truly her path, or would she be better serving the work she loved by remaining at 8 tails, maintaining the closer connection to individual humans and their struggles? Her answer came not through intellectual reasoning but through experience. She was walking through a village one day in her human form, a village she had helped found 3 centuries earlier, now thriving with hundreds of residents, their prosperity built on generations of hard work and the subtle guidance she had provided over decades. She saw children playing in the street, merchants conducting business with honesty and good humor, a wedding procession making its way to the local Inari shrine. She saw the life she had helped nurture, the goodness that existed because she had served faithfully for 900 years. And she understood that achieving 9 tails would not take her away from this work but would allow her to do it at a greater scale, to be present in more places, to serve more people, to weave more lives into the pattern of prosperity and peace that she had spent centuries creating. The power of 9 tails was not a trap or a burden but a gift that would allow her to be more fully what she had always been: a servant, a bridge, a messenger of blessing. As her 900th year approached its end, Yuki returned to the mountain shrine where her long journey had begun. The shrine was much larger now, a proper temple complex with multiple buildings, maintained by a dozen priests, visited daily by hundreds of pilgrims. But the heart of it, the old stone where offerings were still placed, the ancient cedar trees with the Shimenawa hung between them, remained unchanged, a connection to the past that anchored the present. Yuki sat before the old stone in her true form, a massive white fox with 8 magnificent tails, each one moving independently, catching the dawn light and scattering it like prisms. She had asked that she be left alone for this final transformation, and the priests had honored her request, keeping pilgrims away, creating a bubble of sacred silence around the shrine. The sun rose. Cherry blossoms drifted through the air, pink and white petals falling like snow, just as they had 900 years before on the morning of her birth. The air itself seemed to vibrate with spiritual energy, responding to the momentous event about to occur. Yuki felt the change beginning deep within her, a gathering of all the power she had accumulated across 9 centuries, all the wisdom she had gained, all the love she had given and received, all the service she had performed. It concentrated at the base of her spine where her 8th tail merged with her body, building in intensity until it felt like she contained a star, a sun, a source of light that could not be indefinitely constrained. The light burst forth, golden and white, so bright that it could be seen from the village in the valley far below, so powerful that every person who witnessed it felt compelled to bow, to pray, to acknowledge that something sacred was occurring. The light wrapped around Yuki, lifting her from the ground, supporting her in midair as her body underwent its final transformation. She grew larger, her form becoming simultaneously more solid and more ethereal, existing in multiple layers of reality at once. Her fur became pure white, so bright it was almost painful to look at directly, and it seemed to be made not just of physical matter but of concentrated spiritual essence. Her golden eyes opened even wider, gaining depths that suggested she could see into infinite dimensions, perceive all of time laid out like a scroll that could be read from any point. And her tails, her 8th tail split, became 2, and then those 2 grew and developed until she had 9 full, perfect tails, each one as large as her entire body had been in her youth, each one moving with impossible grace, each one trailing wisps of foxfire that danced and flickered with colors that had no names in human language. The transformation completed. The light faded, and Yuki descended gently back to the ground, now fully a nine-tailed Kitsune, a Kyubi no Kitsune, a being of such power and wisdom that she existed at the threshold of divinity. She sat quietly for a long time, adjusting to her new awareness. She could feel every Inari shrine in Japan, sense every prayer offered at every one of them. She could hear the thoughts of pilgrims climbing the mountain path toward her temple. She could see backward through time to her own birth, forward through time to possibilities yet to unfold. She existed not just in this one location but in 100 locations simultaneously, 1,000, her consciousness distributed across space in ways that defied physical limitation. But she was still Yuki, still herself. The expansion had not erased her identity but had deepened it, made it more than it had been while still recognizing what it had always been. She was both individual and archetype, both personal and universal, both Yuki the fox born in a mountain den and Yuki the messenger, the servant of Inari, the bridge between worlds. She stood and walked to the shrine stone, her 9 tails flowing behind her like silk scarves caught in an invisible wind. She touched her nose to the stone where 900 years of offerings had been placed, where her own journey had truly begun when she first saw the mountain kami and understood what she was meant to become. "Thank you," she said, speaking to the kami who had awakened her, to Inari whom she served, to all the humans she had helped and who had helped her understand herself, to the universe itself for the gift of existence and the opportunity to serve. "Thank you for this long journey. Thank you for every century, every tale, every lesson learned. I am ready now for whatever comes next, ready to serve at this new level, ready to be all that I have been becoming across these 900 years. And from the stone, from the air, from the very fabric of reality she felt a response. Not words but a sense of approval, of welcome, of recognition. The kami acknowledged her transformation. Inari blessed her new status. The universe itself seemed to smile upon her achievement. Life as a 9-tailed Kitsune. In the days and weeks and years that followed her transformation, Yuki learned to navigate her new existence. She appeared before the priests who maintained her shrine, allowing them to see her in her 9-tailed glory, and their awe and reverence was profound. Word spread quickly throughout Japan that a new 9-tailed Kitsune had achieved awakening, and pilgrims traveled from hundreds of miles away for the chance to catch even a glimpse of her. But Yuki did not remain constantly in physical form at the mountain shrine. That was the privilege and the responsibility of 9 tails. She could be in many places at once, could manifest wherever she was needed, could spread her attention and her blessing across all the territory she served. She appeared at Inari shrines throughout the province, then throughout the region, eventually throughout all of Japan. She manifested as a great white fox with 9 tails when she wished to be recognized, as a shrine maiden when she wished to move more quietly among humans, as pure light when her physical form was unnecessary. She learned to divide her consciousness, maintaining awareness in dozens of locations simultaneously, each manifestation fully her yet also connected to a greater whole. The work she had been doing for 9 centuries continued, but at a vastly expanded scale. Where once she might have helped a single farmer achieve a better harvest, she now guided weather patterns across entire provinces, ensuring that rain fell where it was needed and sun shone at the proper times. Where once she might have counseled a single merchant toward prosperity, she now influenced trade networks spanning the country, subtly arranging circumstances so that honest merchants prospered while those who dealt in fraud and exploitation found their schemes unraveling. But Yuki never forgot the individual humans whose lives she touched. Even while maintaining her vast overview, managing her expanded responsibilities, she still made time for personal connections, appearing to a child who had lost her way in the forest and guiding her home, sitting with an old woman in her final hours and easing her passage to death, blessing a young couple's marriage and watching with joy as they built a good life together. She discovered that the 9-tailed form brought gifts beyond expanded power. She could now access the full collective knowledge of all Kitsune, living and dead, their accumulated wisdom flowing through her like a vast library to which she had complete access. She could perceive the patterns of karma, seeing how actions rippled forward through time, how choices made today would echo through generations. She could commune directly with Inari and other kami, speaking to them not as supplicant to superior but as colleague to colleague, fellow servants of the cosmic order. One of her greatest joys was meeting other nine-tailed Kitsune and forming relationships with them. They were, in a sense, peers, beings who understood what it meant to carry such power and such responsibility, who knew the loneliness that could come from existing at a remove from ordinary life, who could offer companionship at a level impossible with beings of less awareness. There was Kazan, a nine-tailed Kitsune who had achieved her final tail 2 centuries before Yuki, who served the Eastern Territories and specialized in guiding seafarers and fishermen. There was Tsukiko, whose 9 tails had been earned through 3,000 years of service. She was one of the eldest of their kind, a living connection to ancient times, and she shared stories of Japan's history that no human scholar had ever recorded. These relationships were complex. 9-tailed Kitsune were not numerous enough to be common, not rare enough to be legendary to each other. They occupied a unique position in the cosmic hierarchy, more than spirit animals, less than full kami, serving essential functions that required both their expanded awareness and their maintained connection to the physical world. The teaching of the fox. As centuries passed, for Yuki was now functionally immortal, aging so slowly that changes were imperceptible across mere decades. She began to take on another role, teacher. Young Kitsune, those just beginning their journey toward multiple tails, sought her out for guidance. She helped them understand their nature, navigate the challenges each new tail brought, avoid the pitfalls that had destroyed so many of their kind. One such young Kitsune was Ren, a male fox who had just grown his 2nd tail and was struggling with the expansion of his powers. He had accidentally created an illusion so convincing that an entire village had become lost in it, wandering through a phantom forest that existed overlaid on the real landscape. It had taken 3 days to dispel the illusion and return things to normal, and the villagers were now terrified of all Kitsune, threatening to set traps and hunt them. Yuki manifested before Ren in a quiet glade, her 9 tails glowing softly in the afternoon sun. The young Kitsune prostrated himself before her, his 2 tails trembling with shame and fear. "I didn't mean to," he said, his voice breaking. "I was just practicing, trying to create a simple illusion of flowers, and it grew and grew until I couldn't control it. I've ruined everything. The villagers hate us now. I've undone the work of generations of Kitsune who built trust with these humans." "Stand up, Ren," Yuki said gently. "Look at me." He stood, though he kept his eyes downcast, unable to meet her golden gaze. "Mistakes are how we learn," Yuki told him. "Do you think I never made errors when I was young? When my 2nd tail came, I accidentally set fire to an entire grove of sacred trees. The blaze could be seen for miles. I was mortified. I thought I had destroyed something irreplaceable." Ren's eyes widened. But you're perfect. Everyone says so." Yuki laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "I am far from perfect. I am simply old, and with age comes a long list of mistakes from which to learn." The sacred grove? It grew back even more beautiful than before. The fire cleared out dead wood and disease, allowed new growth to flourish. What I thought was catastrophe turned out to be renewal. Sometimes our mistakes serve purposes we cannot immediately see. But the villagers will recover their equilibrium, Yuki assured him. "I will go to them, explain what happened, demonstrate that not all Kitsune are threats. You will go to them as well, apologize sincerely, and work to regain their trust. It will take time. You will have to be patient, consistent in your good behavior, reliable in your helpfulness. But trust can be rebuilt, Ren. That is one of humanity's great gifts. Their capacity for forgiveness, their willingness to give second chances. You must be worthy of that chance. Over the years that followed, Yuki mentored Ren as he grew from 2 tails to 3, then eventually to 4. She taught him control, wisdom, the importance of intention and humility. She helped him understand that power without wisdom was dangerous, that every ability came with corresponding responsibility, that service was not weakness but the highest expression of strength. She taught other young Kitsune as well, becoming known among her kind as one who would never turn away a student, who would patiently answer even the most basic questions, who remembered what it was like to be young and confused and frightened by one's own capabilities. Through this teaching, Yuki helped shape the next generations of Kitsune, ensuring that most would choose the path of service rather than mischief, of cooperation rather than conflict with humans. The test of compassion. Despite her vast power and wisdom, despite her 9 tails and her centuries of service, Yuki still faced challenges. One of the greatest came in the form of a human sorcerer named Genji, who had studied forbidden arts and believed he could capture and enslave Kitsune, stealing their power for himself. Genji was a complex figure, not purely evil but twisted by ambition and jealousy. He had been born with potential for spiritual power but lacked the natural gift that some possessed. Through years of grueling study and increasingly dark practices, he had accumulated considerable power, but it was never enough. When he learned of the 9-tailed Kitsune called Yuki, he became obsessed with the idea of capturing her, believing that if he could bind her to his will, he would become the greatest sorcerer in Japan. He spent a decade preparing, gathering materials, studying ancient rituals, learning the true names of spirits he could use as allies. Finally, on a moonless night when spiritual boundaries were particularly thin, he enacted his plan. He came to Yuki's mountain shrine with a small army of lesser spirits he had enslaved, with binding circles drawn in sacred ink, with talismans carved from wood taken from trees struck by lightning, with all the tools and knowledge his dark arts had given him. He intended to trap Yuki, bind her with unbreakable chains of spiritual force, compel her obedience through rituals that subverted the natural order. Yuki sensed his approach long before he arrived. She could have avoided him easily, could have manifested somewhere else and left him grasping at emptiness. She could have destroyed him with barely a thought. A 9-tailed Kitsune's power vastly exceeded that of any human sorcerer, no matter how learned in dark arts. But she did neither. Instead, she waited for him at the mountain shrine, sitting in her 9-tailed form on the old stone where offerings were placed, her white fur glowing in the darkness, her golden eyes watching Genji's approach with something like sadness. When Genji saw her waiting, he hesitated. This was not what he had expected. He had imagined having to hunt her, trap her, overcome her resistance. But here she sat, apparently offering no opposition, watching him with those ancient, knowing eyes. "You will not fight me?" he asked, his voice uncertain, his carefully prepared spells suddenly feeling inadequate. "I will not," Yuki confirmed. "But I will not submit to binding either. You cannot compel what is freely given, Genji. You have spent 10 years preparing to take what I would gladly give if properly asked. You would serve me?" Genji asked, disbelief and hope warring in his voice. "You would grant me your power?" "I did not say that," Yuki replied calmly. "I said I will not fight you. That is very different from agreeing to be your slave, Genji. But I will offer you something perhaps more valuable than power. I will offer you understanding. If you will release the spirits you have enslaved, if you will renounce the dark path you have walked, if you will sit with me and speak honestly about what drives you, I will show you what you truly seek." "You're trying to trick me," Genji said, anger flaring. "This is Kitsune deception. You want me to lower my guard so you can escape or attack." "If I wished to escape, I would not be here," Yuki pointed out. "If I wished to attack, you would already be dead. I am a 9-tailed Kitsune, Genji. Your power, considerable though it is for a human, is nothing compared to mine. I could unmake you with a thought. But I do not wish to unmake you. I wish to help you if you will allow it." Genji stood frozen, his mind racing. Everything he had learned, everything he had prepared, had not accounted for this possibility, that his target would offer cooperation rather than resistance, understanding rather than combat. The spirits he had enslaved whispered in his mind, urging him to attack, to use the bindings he had prepared, not to trust the Kitsune's words. But looking into Yuki's golden eyes, seeing the patience and compassion there, something in Genji broke. The ambition, the jealousy, the decade of dark preparations. Suddenly it all seemed hollow, pointless, a misdirection of energy that had only led him deeper into isolation and bitterness. "I don't know what I truly seek," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought it was power. I thought if I were powerful enough, respected enough, feared enough, then I would finally be enough. But it's never enough. The more I gain, the more inadequate I feel. The more I achieve, the emptier it seems." "Come," Yuki said, her voice gentle. "Sit with me. Release the spirits you have bound. They suffer under your control, and their suffering adds to your own, whether you recognize it or not. And then we will talk, truly talk, and perhaps we will discover together what it is you actually need." Slowly, shakily, Genji approached. He deactivated the binding circles, spoke the words of release for the enslaved spirits, felt them depart with what seemed like relief. He had thought they served him willingly or at least neutrally, but feeling their departure he understood how much pain he had been causing, how much resentment had been building. He sat before Yuki, this great nine-tailed Kitsune who could have destroyed him but chose instead to listen. And he talked. He spoke of his childhood, growing up aware that he had spiritual sensitivity but not the natural gift of those who became powerful priests or respected on Myoji. He described his frustration watching others achieve with ease what he could only accomplish through tremendous effort. He confessed his jealousy, his anger, his sense that the universe had treated him unfairly by giving him just enough ability to sense what he was missing but not enough to achieve what he desired. Yuki listened without judgment, her presence a combination of ancient wisdom and genuine compassion. When Genji finally fell silent, exhausted by his confession, she spoke. "The power you seek, Genji, you have been pursuing in entirely the wrong direction. True power does not come from binding others to your will, from taking what is not freely given, from attempting to dominate and control. True power comes from connection, from service, from aligning yourself with forces greater than yourself rather than attempting to subjugate them to your will." "But I'm not naturally gifted like others," Genji protested. "I don't have the inherent ability to." "You have different gifts," Yuki interrupted gently. "You have tremendous dedication. 10 years spent in preparation for tonight shows remarkable focus and commitment. You have intelligence and scholarly ability. The knowledge you've acquired is impressive, even if you've been using it poorly. You have strength of will. It takes considerable force of personality to maintain the bindings you created. All of these are gifts, Genji. The question is how you choose to use them." "How should I use them?" Genji asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice now, a willingness to learn that had been absent before. "That depends on what you truly value," Yuki said. "Not what you think you should value, not what others have told you to value, but what genuinely matters to you in your heart. Tell me, Genji, in your life, when have you been happiest? When have you felt most satisfied, most alive, most yourself?" Genji thought about this, really thought about it, perhaps for the first time in years. "When I was young," he said slowly, "before I became obsessed with power, I used to help people. My mother was a midwife and I would assist her. I could sense when babies were in distress during birth, could feel where the mother needed support. I couldn't fix problems directly, but I could guide my mother's hands, help her know where to apply pressure, when to encourage pushing, when to tell the mother to rest. Together we saved many lives. I felt useful, important, like I had purpose." "And why did you stop?" Yuki asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Because it wasn't impressive," Genji admitted. "Because people didn't celebrate what I did, they celebrated my mother as they should have, but I wanted recognition too. I wanted people to see me as powerful, as important, as someone to be feared and respected. Assisting births felt too small, too humble. So I pursued other paths. And in pursuing those paths, Yuki said, you lost yourself. You abandoned what genuinely fulfilled you in favor of what you thought should fulfill you. Genji, there is tremendous power in bringing life into the world safely, in supporting women through one of their most vulnerable moments, in ensuring that babies survive to grow and thrive. That work matters more than all the dark sorcery you have learned. It matters more than binding spirits or capturing Kitsune. It matters because it directly serves life, growth, connection, all the things that the universe truly values. But I'm a man, Genji said uncertainly. Men don't serve as midwives. It's not proper. Who decided what is proper? Yuki asked. And more importantly, why do you care? You were willing to spend 10 years learning forbidden arts, to risk your soul studying darkness, to come here tonight prepared to commit terrible acts, all because you cared more about power than propriety. But you're not willing to return to work that fulfills you because social convention says it's women's work? That is perhaps the saddest thing you've told me tonight, Genji. Her words struck him like physical blows. She was right. He had been willing to defy every spiritual and ethical boundary in his pursuit of power, but he wasn't willing to defy social convention to do work that mattered. The contradiction was stark and undeniable. I don't know if I can go back, Genji said. I've done terrible things. I've hurt spirits, corrupted my own soul, wasted years on darkness when I could have been helping. How can I return to something pure after diving so deep into shadow? The same way anyone recovers from mistakes, Yuki told him. Through acknowledgement, repentance, and changed action. You cannot undo what you have done, Genji, but you can choose differently going forward. You can dedicate the rest of your life to service instead of domination. You can use your gifts to help instead of harm. The path back to light is always available, no matter how far into darkness one has traveled. But you must choose it. I cannot force you, any more than you could have forced me into servitude. They talked through the night, Yuki and Genji, the nine-tailed Kitsune and the former dark sorcerer. By the time dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold, Genji had made his choice. He would return to his village, seek out the current generation's midwife, offer his services. He would use his spiritual sensitivity and his hard-won knowledge to help bring babies safely into the world. He would make amends as much as that was possible for the harm he had caused. Before he left, Yuki gave him a gift, a small jade talisman carved with her own paw, imbued with a fraction of her power. This will help you, she explained. When you are assisting at difficult births, when mother or child is in danger, hold this and call on me. I will lend you what you need to help them. Consider it payment in advance for the good work you will do. Genji took the talisman with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face. Why, he asked. Why would you help me after I came here intending to enslave you? Because I am a servant, Yuki said simply. Because helping is what I do, what I have always done, what I will always do. Because you genuinely want to change and that deserves support. Because every being, spirit or human or Kitsune, is worthy of compassion and second chances. Go now, Genji. Live well. Serve faithfully. Let the rest of your life be the apology and the amends for your mistakes. He bowed deeply, then turned and walked down the mountain as the sun rose behind him, leaving Yuki alone at her shrine. She watched him go, sensing his determination, his genuine desire to change, and she felt satisfaction. This was the work of nine tails, not just the exercise of vast power, but the application of wisdom and compassion in ways that transformed lives and redirected destinies. The legacy of service. Centuries flowed past like rivers seeking the sea. Yuki continued her work, her presence a constant throughout Japan, her influence touching countless lives. She appeared in stories and legends, in art and literature, in shrine decorations and festival celebrations. Children grew up hearing tales of the nine-tailed white fox who served Inari, who helped those in need, who demonstrated that power could be used for protection rather than domination. She watched Japan transform through historical eras. The rise and fall of shoguns, the arrival of European traders and Christian missionaries, the modernization of the Meiji period, the wars of the 20th century, the technological revolution of the modern age. Through all these changes, Yuki remained, adapting her methods to changing circumstances but never wavering in her core purpose. In the modern era, she found new ways to serve. She blessed businesses, appearing in dreams to entrepreneurs with good intentions, guiding them toward success. She protected children crossing dangerous streets, manifesting as a sudden intuition that made drivers slow down at crucial moments. She inspired artists and writers, feeding them images and ideas that would create works of beauty. She counseled the grieving, the lost, the confused, appearing to them in various forms. Sometimes as a fox, sometimes as a kind stranger, sometimes simply as a presence they felt but could not see. She continued teaching younger Kitsune, helping them navigate a world where supernatural beings were no longer widely believed in but were perhaps needed more than ever. She showed them how to work subtly, how to serve without demanding recognition, how to find satisfaction in quiet helpfulness rather than dramatic intervention. And she maintained her connection to Inari, serving as one of the kami's primary messengers, ensuring that the prosperity and fertility and worldly success that Inari represented continued to flow to those who honored the old ways, even in this age of science and skepticism. One day, or rather one moment across many days, for she existed in multiple times and places simultaneously now, Yuki returned to her original mountain shrine. The site had changed over the centuries. The old shrine had been replaced several times, each iteration larger and grander than the last, until now a proper temple complex occupied the mountain, with multiple buildings and a permanent staff of priests and maintenance workers. The sacred stone where offerings had been placed in ancient times was now encased in a beautiful pavilion, protected from weather, honored as the foundation upon which all the rest had been built. But the cedar trees remained, the same trees that had been there when Yuki was born, for cedars can live for thousands of years if properly protected. And the Shimenawa still hung between them, marking the boundary of sacred space, connecting present to past across the span of over 1,000 years. Yuki manifested in her nine-tailed form beneath these ancient trees, her white fur glowing in the afternoon sun, her 9 magnificent tails arranged in a perfect fan behind her. She sat and looked out over the valley below, where villages had become towns, towns had become cities, and the land she had known in her youth had been transformed by human activity beyond anything those early villagers could have imagined. But the essential nature of things remained unchanged. Humans still loved and hoped and struggled. They still prayed for health and prosperity. They still needed guidance and protection. They still created beauty and meaning despite their brief lives. And Kitsune like Yuki still served, bridging worlds, carrying messages, blessing those who honored the connection between physical and spiritual realms. Was it worth it? A voice asked, and Yuki turned to see Shirayuki, the 8-tailed Kitsune who had counseled her so many centuries ago. Shirayuki was now a 9-tailed Kitsune herself, having achieved her final transformation 200 years after Yuki. The journey? Yuki replied. Yes. Every moment of every century. The struggles and the joys, the failures and the successes, the endless service and the quiet satisfactions. All of it was worth experiencing, worth learning from, worth being. Do you ever regret not remaining an ordinary fox? Shirayuki asked. Living a normal lifespan, having kids of your own, existing without the weight of centuries and the burden of power? No, Yuki said without hesitation. I am what I was meant to be. This path chose me as much as I chose it. And the work matters, Shirayuki. Every life touched, every prayer answered, every small blessing given, it all matters. In the grand scope of existence, we 9-tailed ones serve an essential function. We maintain the connections that humans need but often forget they need. We witness their beauty and their struggle. We help them flourish. That is sacred work. How could I regret being allowed to do it? Do you think there will be 10 tails? Shirayuki asked with a smile, for this was an old joke among nine-tailed Kitsune. Some final transformation that takes us even higher? If there is, Yuki laughed, I suspect it involves transcending physical form entirely, becoming pure spirit, indistinguishable from the kami we serve. And at that point, are we still Kitsune? Or have we become something else entirely? Does it matter what we call ourselves? Shirayuki asked, as long as we continue to serve? No, Yuki agreed. It doesn't matter at all. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun sank toward the western horizon, two nine-tailed Kitsune who had walked the long path from ordinary foxes to beings of such power they were nearly divine, who had chosen service over domination, compassion over cruelty, patient endurance over the temptation to withdraw from a world that could be painful to watch. As darkness fell and stars emerged in the clear sky, Yuki stood and stretched, her nine tails swishing gently. I should go, she said. There's a child in Kyoto who's having nightmares and I promised I would help. And a merchant in Osaka who needs guidance about an ethical dilemma. And a young Kitsune in Hokkaido who just grew her third tail and is frightened by her increasing power. Always working, Shirayuki said fondly. Never resting. There will be time for rest later, Yuki replied. Perhaps much later. For now there is work to be done, service to be given, connection to be maintained. That is what nine tails means after all, not just power but responsibility. Not just wisdom but application of that wisdom. Not just existence but purpose. She transformed into light, her physical form dissolving into pure spiritual energy, and in that form she could move instantaneously to wherever she was needed. She appeared simultaneously in Kyoto, in Osaka, in Hokkaido, in a dozen other locations, each manifestation fully her, each presence complete and attentive, serving, helping, guiding, blessing. This was what it meant to be a nine-tailed Kitsune. This was what the long journey had been preparing her for. This was the purpose that had been seeded in her from birth, nurtured through centuries of experience, blossomed into fullness through patient dedication to service. The eternal present. In the eternal present moment where Yuki existed, for nine-tailed Kitsune experienced time differently, aware of past and future simultaneously with the present, she could see the whole pattern of her existence laid out like an intricate scroll painting. She could see herself as a newborn kit, eyes closed, nestled against her mother's warmth. She could see her first tail, fluffy and small. She could see the mountain kami's first recognition of what she would become. She could see each century's growth, each tail's emergence, each lesson learned through experience. She could see all the lives she had touched, thousands upon thousands of humans helped, blessed, guided, protected. She could see the ripple effects of her service, how one person helped became two, two became four, multiplying outward across generations until entire communities flourished because she had helped their ancestors centuries ago. She could see the other Kitsune she had mentored, many of whom were now working toward their own multiple tails, carrying forward the tradition of service she had exemplified. She could see Rin, whom she had counseled after his disastrous illusion, now a confident six-tailed Kitsune serving the southern islands. She could see dozens of others, each on their own journey, each learning in their own time that power without wisdom and compassion was hollow. She could see Genji, the former dark sorcerer, who had indeed returned to helping with births and had assisted safely in delivering over 1,000 babies before his death at a ripe old age, his soul traveling to a good afterlife because he had used his remaining years to make amends for his earlier mistakes. She could see temples and shrines dedicated to Inari throughout Japan, each one graced with statues of Kitsune, some clearly meant to represent Yuki herself, others representing Kitsune in general, all of them testifying to the enduring relationship between fox spirits and the kami they served. And she could see forward, though the future was less fixed than the past, more mutable, branching into possibilities rather than certainties. She could see a future where humans continued to modernize, to develop technology, to reshape their world in profound ways. She could see paths where the connection to the spiritual realm grew weaker, where shrines fell into disuse, where the old stories were forgotten. But she could also see paths where the ancient wisdom was preserved, where humans maintained their connection to the sacred even while embracing the new, where beings like her continued to serve as bridges between worlds. Which path humanity would take was not entirely within her power to determine. She could influence, could guide, could provide opportunities for connection, but ultimately humans had to choose for themselves whether to honor the relationship between physical and spiritual realms. That was their right, their responsibility, their essential freedom. But regardless of what path humans chose, Yuki knew she would continue serving. If they moved away from explicit spiritual practice, she would work more subtly, in dreams and intuitions and coincidences. If they maintained the old ways, she would continue appearing at shrines, blessing pilgrims, maintaining traditions. However the work needed to be done, she would do it because service was not contingent on recognition or reward but was its own purpose, its own satisfaction. This understanding, that service was both means and end, process and goal, journey and destination, was perhaps the deepest wisdom that came with Nine Tails. Power was ultimately just a tool. What mattered was how that tool was used, what purposes it served, what outcomes it enabled. And Yuki had chosen, across 9 centuries and 9 tales, to use her power for connection, for blessing, for the patient, persistent, humble work of helping wherever help was needed. A message carried forward. In the modern era, in a world of concrete and steel, of computers and cars, of science and skepticism, a young woman named Akari sat in her small apartment in Tokyo, feeling lost and alone. She had come to the city from a rural village, pursuing career opportunities that hadn't materialized, living in isolation among millions of people, disconnected from family and tradition, questioning whether her life had meaning or purpose. On impulse, or what she thought was impulse, though it was actually a gentle nudge from a certain nine-tailed Kitsune, Akari visited an Inari shrine tucked between modern buildings in a neighborhood she'd never explored before. The shrine was small, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it, but beautifully maintained, with red torii gates and fox statues that seemed to watch passers-by with knowing eyes. Akari had not visited a shrine since leaving her village. She had fallen out of the habit of prayer, of connecting with the spiritual traditions her grandmother had taught her. But standing before this small shrine in the heart of the bustling city, she felt something stir within her. A memory, a longing, a sense that she had lost something important and didn't know how to find it again. She approached the shrine, somewhat awkwardly, trying to remember the proper procedures. She dropped a coin in the offering box, pulled the rope to ring the bell, clapped twice, pressed her hands together and closed her eyes. But she didn't know what to pray for. Success? Well, money? None of those seemed quite right. "Help me find my way," she finally whispered. "I'm lost. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. I don't know who I'm supposed to be. Please, if anyone is listening, help me find my way." She opened her eyes and looked at the fox statues flanking the shrine. One held a key in its mouth, the key to the rice granary, symbolizing prosperity. The other held a jewel, the wish-fulfilling jewel that granted blessings. Both statues were weathered by time and elements, their features softened by decades of rain and wind, but their eyes seemed almost alive, almost aware, almost looking at her with recognition and compassion. Akari felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of being seen and acknowledged that she hadn't felt since moving to Tokyo. She didn't see a nine-tailed fox manifest before her. Such dramatic manifestations were rare in the modern age, reserved for moments of extreme need or significance. But she felt a presence, gentle and reassuring, that seemed to whisper to her heart, "You are not lost. You are exactly where you need to be, learning what you need to learn. Be patient. Be open. Pay attention. The path will reveal itself." She left the shrine feeling lighter, more hopeful, though she couldn't have explained why. Over the days and weeks that followed, Akari began noticing things she had overlooked before. A community center looking for volunteers to teach traditional crafts to children, a small gallery featuring works by artists from rural areas like the one she'd come from, a notice about a group that maintained urban shrines and was seeking new members. She responded to these opportunities, making connections, finding communities, discovering that her rural background and traditional knowledge, things she had thought were disadvantages in the modern city, were actually valuable, appreciated by people who wanted to maintain connections to older ways of life even while living in contemporary society. Within 6 months, Akari had found her place. She was teaching children the traditional weaving techniques her grandmother had taught her, helping maintain small shrines in her neighborhood, connecting urban dwellers with the spiritual traditions many of them had grown up with but left behind. She had found purpose, community, meaning, everything she had been searching for when she first arrived in Tokyo. She never knew that her prayer at the small Inari shrine had been heard by Yuki, that the nine-tailed Kitsune had gently arranged circumstances to bring opportunities to Akari's attention, that each coincidence and lucky break had been subtly guided by an ancient fox spirit who had spent over 1,000 years helping humans find their way. Akari attributed her changed circumstances to her own efforts, to timing, to luck, and that was fine. Yuki didn't need recognition. The work itself was the reward. This was how nine-tailed Kitsune served in the modern world, quietly, subtly, through apparently natural means, maintaining connection between humans and the sacred even when humans no longer consciously sought such connection. The methods had changed with the times, but the essential work remained the same. Helping humans flourish, blessing those who were open to blessing, maintaining the ancient relationship between physical and spiritual realms. The wisdom of the ancients. In a gathering that occurred outside normal time and space, where the boundaries between physical and spiritual realms dissolved entirely, Yuki met with other ancient beings, nine-tailed Kitsune like herself, but also Tengu and Tanuki and other yokai who had achieved similar levels of power and wisdom, and even some kami who wished to consult with those who maintained close connections to the human world. These gatherings happened rarely, perhaps once per human generation, but they were important. They allowed those who served at the highest levels to share knowledge, coordinate efforts, discuss challenges, and renew their sense of shared purpose. Tsukiko, the eldest nine-tailed Kitsune present, opened the gathering. Her white fur was so pure it seemed to be made of moonlight, and her 9 tails moved with the slow dignity of ages. She had walked the earth for 3,000 years, had seen empires rise and fall, had witnessed humanity's greatest achievements and most terrible mistakes. The world changes, Tsukiko began, her voice like wine through ancient pines. Each generation brings transformations that could not have been imagined by the previous generation. Technology accelerates. Human population explodes. The natural world shrinks under their expansion. And yet, fundamentally, humans remain the same, mortal beings seeking meaning, connection, purpose, love. Our role in serving them becomes both more difficult and more necessary. How do we serve in a world where belief in us is declining? Asked Kazan, the 9-tailed Kitsune who served the Eastern Territories. When shrines fall into disrepair for lack of worshippers, when the young no longer learn the old stories, when our very existence is dismissed as superstition? We adapt, Yuki replied. We find new forms for our ancient work. Humans still need guidance, protection, blessing. They simply no longer frame those needs in spiritual terms. A businessman seeking success may not pray at an Inari shrine, but we can still help him make ethical choices that lead to sustainable prosperity. A mother worried about her child may not ask for Kitsune protection, but we can still ensure that child's path crosses helpful people at crucial moments. The work continues even if the framing changes. But doesn't it trouble you, asked a younger 9-tailed Kitsune named Yukio, who had only recently achieved his final tail, that we serve without recognition, that our efforts go unacknowledged, that humans attribute to chance or their own efforts what we have helped arrange? Why would that trouble me? Yuki asked gently. Did I seek 9 tails for recognition? Did I serve for 1,000 years to be praised? The work itself is the purpose. The service itself is the satisfaction. Whether humans consciously acknowledge it or not changes nothing about the value of what we do. A tengu, a bird-like spirit of the mountains, spoke up. But there is danger in complete disconnection. If humans entirely cease believing in the spiritual realm, if they cut themselves off entirely from connection with us and with Kami, they lose something essential to their nature. They become rootless, disconnected, vulnerable to despair. Some acknowledgement, some maintained relationship, serves their well-being even beyond the specific help we provide. This is true, Tsukiko agreed, which is why we must work to maintain at least thin threads of connection. The shrines that remain open, we must ensure they continue to provide genuine experiences of the sacred. The stories that are still told, we must inspire new versions that speak to contemporary sensibilities. The humans who still sense our presence, we must nurture that sensitivity, help it develop, use those individuals as anchors for broader spiritual awareness. The gathering continued for what seemed like hours, though time functioned strangely in that space. They discussed specific challenges and shared solutions. They coordinated territories and responsibilities. They renewed their commitments to service and to each other. They remembered together why they had chosen this path and why it remained worthwhile despite difficulties. As the gathering concluded and participants began to depart, Tsukiko approached Yuki privately. The ancient Kitsune looked at Yuki with eyes that had witnessed 3 millennia of history, that held wisdom accumulated across more time than most beings could imagine. You have done well, Yuki, Tsukiko said. Your service has been exemplary. Your wisdom has grown deep. Your compassion has never wavered. I wanted you to know that those of us who have walked this path longer recognize and honor your work. Thank you, Elder, Yuki replied, bowing respectfully. Though I serve not for recognition but because service is my nature, your words mean much to me. I know, Tsukiko smiled, which is precisely why you deserve them. But I wanted to tell you something else as well. You approach a milestone. In another 2 centuries, you will have lived for 1,500 years. At that point, you will be offered a choice that has been offered to only a handful of 9-tailed Kitsune in history. What choice? Yuki asked, curious despite herself. The choice to become fully Kami, Tsukiko explained. To transcend your Kitsune nature entirely and become a deity in your own right, no longer serving other Kami but joining their ranks. Not all 9-tailed Kitsune are offered this opportunity, only those who have demonstrated truly exceptional dedication and wisdom over sufficient time. The decision will be yours, Yuki. You may accept and transcend or decline and remain as you are, continuing your current service indefinitely. And what did you choose? Yuki asked. For surely this choice was offered to you as well. Tsukiko's smile deepened. I chose to remain Kitsune. For me, the work of serving from this position, maintaining the connection between humans and the fully divine, felt more important than ascending to join the Kami themselves. But my choice need not be yours. When your time comes, you will know what is right for you. They parted, Tsukiko departing to whatever ancient territory she maintained, Yuki returning to her mountains and shrines, her cities and villages, her endless patient work of service and blessing. But Tsukiko's words remained with her, and Yuki found herself contemplating them during the centuries that followed. What would it mean to become fully Kami? To lose even the vestigial connection to physical form, to exist only as divine principle and presence? Would she still be herself in any meaningful sense, or would the transformation be so complete that Yuki would cease to exist, replaced by something new wearing her accumulated experience like borrowed robes? The question was not urgent. She had 200 years before the choice would be offered, and much work to do in the meantime. But it gave her a new perspective on her current existence, a deeper appreciation for what it meant to be a 9-tailed Kitsune, poised between mortal and divine, physical and spiritual, individual and archetypal. The continuing journey. And so Yuki's journey continues. She serves at her mountain shrine and at 10,000 others. She appears in Tokyo and Osaka and Kyoto and rural villages whose names appear on no maps. She walks through forests where foxes have lived for 10,000 years and through urban parks where concrete has covered the earth but small shrines persist in corners and on rooftops. She helps farmers and merchants, priests and businesspeople, children and elders, the faithful and the skeptical. She protects, guides, blesses, teaches, comforts, and encourages. She maintains connections, bridges worlds, carries messages, demonstrates through action what power truly means and what service truly requires. She remains, as she has always been, a servant of Inari, a messenger between worlds, a white fox with 9 magnificent tails, an ancient being whose wisdom spans centuries but whose compassion remains as fresh and genuine as it was on the day she first helped a village woman find healing herbs for her sick mother. Her fur is white as fresh snow on mountain peaks, as pure as clouds at dawn, as bright as the full moon on a clear night. Her eyes are gold as sunlight filtered through autumn leaves, as warm as firelight in a winter home, as deep as wells that reach toward the earth's heart. Her 9 tails move independently, each one responding to different currents of spiritual and physical energy, each one a testament to centuries of growth and service. She is vast in power, capable of reshaping reality within certain bounds, of manifesting in multiple locations simultaneously, of perceiving past and future laid out like scrolls to be read. But she uses that power with restraint, with wisdom, with the deep understanding that true strength lies not in domination but in support, not in control but in guidance, not in forcing outcomes but in enabling choices. She is ancient in wisdom, having witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, the transformation of landscapes, the evolution of human society from simple agricultural communities to complex technological civilizations. But she remains curious, still learning, still discovering new ways to serve, still finding surprising depth in the simplest acts of kindness. She is patient beyond mortal comprehension, willing to work on timescales measured in centuries, to plant seeds of benefit that will not bear fruit for generations, to serve without immediate gratification or visible reward. But she also attends to immediate needs, to the child lost in the forest right now, to the woman in labor at this very moment, to the businessman facing an ethical choice today. She operates simultaneously at multiple scales of time and space, vast and intimate, eternal and immediate. She is the embodiment of the Kitsune ideal, intelligent, powerful, devoted, mysterious, both wild nature and refined culture, both animal and more than animal, both individual and archetype. She represents what all Kitsune might become if they choose the path of service over the temptations of mischief or cruelty, if they develop wisdom alongside power, if they remain connected to their compassionate nature even as they grow in magical ability. She is, in the end, exactly what she set out to become 900 years ago when the mountain kami first acknowledged her nature and potential. A bridge between worlds, a blessing to those she serves, a light in darkness, a persistent presence working tirelessly for the flourishing of life in all its forms. And every day, in 10,000 ways both large and small, Yuki continues choosing service, continues offering blessing, continues maintaining connection, continues doing the work that 9 tails represents. Not just power but purpose, not just wisdom but application, not just existence but meaning. This is the story of the 9 tails, of one Kitsune's journey from birth to transcendence, of the long, slow accumulation of power and wisdom across centuries, of the choice to serve rather than dominate, of the patience required to help creatures who live such brief lives compared to one's own immortal span. It is a story that continues even now, in this very moment, as Yuki manifests in 1,000 places simultaneously, appearing to a child who loves foxes and wishes she could meet one, blessing a bride and groom at their wedding, guiding a farmer toward the water his crops need, comforting an elder in her final hours, teaching a young Kitsune the importance of restraint, arranging the apparently chance encounter between two people who will become important to each other, protecting a shrine from vandals, inspiring an artist working on a painting of mythological subjects, ensuring that someone who prayed for help receives exactly the assistance they need in exactly the form they can accept. In every moment, across every location Yuki serves. Her 9 tails swish gently in winds physical and spiritual. Her golden eyes see everything requiring attention. Her vast consciousness maintains awareness of countless situations simultaneously. And her compassion, that essential quality that has defined her across 1,000 years, remains undiminished, as fresh and genuine now as it was when she was a young fox with a single tail, sitting at a mountain shrine, understanding for the first time what she was meant to become. The journey from 1 tail to 9 is long, 1,000 years at minimum, often longer for those who grow more slowly or who take time to learn their lessons. It requires patience, persistence, wisdom, and above all, the choice again and again and again to use power for blessing rather than harm, for service rather than domination, for connection rather than isolation. Not all Kitsune complete this journey. Many remain at 3 or 4 or 5 tails, content with their current level, uninterested in the greater responsibilities that come with additional tails. Some pursue power for its own sake and become corrupted, turning into the mischievous or malevolent Yokitsune that give all fox spirits a dangerous reputation. Others simply fade, losing interest in the world, withdrawing into isolation until they become so disconnected from physical reality that they dissolve entirely into the spiritual realm. But for those like Yuki who complete the journey, who grow all 9 tails, who accumulate not just power but wisdom and compassion, who choose service as their fundamental orientation to existence, for them the reward is profound. They become bridges between worlds, anchors connecting humanity to the sacred, demonstrations of what spiritual beings can and should be. They serve essential functions in the cosmic order, maintaining relationships that benefit all beings, physical and spiritual alike. And perhaps most importantly, they demonstrate through their existence and their choices that power is not inherently corrupting, that immortality need not lead to detachment or cruelty, that it is possible to maintain compassion and connection even across centuries and millennia, that service is not weakness but the highest form of strength. This is what the 9 tails represent, in the end, not just magical power or spiritual authority, but the wisdom to use that power well, the compassion to care about its effects, the patience to work on timescales that transcend individual human lives, and the deep understanding that we are all connected, that helping others ultimately helps oneself, that service to the whole serves every part including the one who serves. Yuki embodies all of this. She is the living demonstration of these principles, the walking example of what a 9-tailed Kitsune should be. And through her example she inspires other Kitsune to follow similar paths, teaches younger spirits how to develop their abilities responsibly, shows by her actions that the best use of power is in blessing and serving those who have less power. Her influence ripples outward through time and space, affecting not just those she directly helps but those who are helped by those she helped, and their children and their children's children, on and on through generations until entire communities flourish because 900 years ago a white fox chose to pick up a healing herb and leave it where a desperate daughter would find it. This is the power of service, the true meaning of 9 tails, the lesson that takes centuries to learn fully and 1,000 years to embody completely, that we are strongest when we support others, that we are wisest when we help others learn, that we are most ourselves when we look beyond ourselves to the larger web of connection in which we all exist. And so Yuki continues, day after day, century after century, serving faithfully, blessing generously, maintaining patiently the ancient relationship between fox spirits and the humans they help, between physical and spiritual realms, between the mortal and the divine. An ending that is also a beginning. And now, dear friend, as our story draws toward its close, as your eyes grow heavy and your breath deepens into the rhythms of approaching sleep, imagine yourself sitting beside Yuki at her mountain shrine. The evening is peaceful, the air cool and gentle. Cherry blossoms drift through the twilight, landing softly on the ancient stone where offerings have been placed for over 1,000 years. Yuki sits in her nine-tailed form, her white fur glowing softly in the fading light, her golden eyes watching you with kindness and understanding. Her 9 magnificent tails arrange themselves around her like a living cloak, each one moving slightly, independently, responding to spiritual currents you cannot perceive but can somehow sense. She speaks to you, her voice gentle as falling leaves, warm as sunlight on your face. You have heard my story, the tale of my journey from 1 tail to 9, from ordinary fox to divine messenger. But I tell you this story not to glorify myself but to teach you something important, something worth carrying into your dreams and into your waking life. Growth takes time. Wisdom accumulates slowly. True power comes not from force but from patience, from choosing again and again to serve rather than dominate, to help rather than harm, to connect rather than isolate. Every century of my life brought new challenges, new lessons, new opportunities to choose who I wanted to be. Your life, though much shorter than mine, contains its own journey, its own accumulation of wisdom, its own series of choices about how to use whatever power you have. Service is sacred. Whether you serve as I do, as a bridge between worlds, or in simpler ways, helping a neighbor, doing honest work, raising children with love, creating beauty, being kind to strangers, all service matters. All service connects you to something larger than yourself. All service is participation in the great work of helping life flourish. Compassion is strength. It would have been easier in many ways to become like a Kuro, cynical and cruel, using my powers for amusement or revenge. But compassion, the choice to care even when caring costs you, even when those you care for make mistakes, even when your service goes unrecognized, is what transforms power from danger into blessing. You are connected. Just as I serve as a bridge between humans and kami, you are a bridge between past and future, between the people who shaped you and those you will influence, between the world as it is and the world as it might be. Your choices ripple outward. Your actions matter. Even your smallest kindness affects the larger pattern. Sleep now with the knowledge that you are held in a web of connection that extends far beyond what you can see. Sleep with the understanding that forces both physical and spiritual work constantly, subtly, to help all beings flourish. Sleep with the peace that comes from knowing your life has meaning, your struggles have purpose, your existence matters in the vast unfolding story of life on this beautiful earth. And when you wake, carry forward what you have learned. Live with patience, serve with compassion, grow in wisdom, use whatever power you have for blessing rather than harm. This is the lesson of the 9 tails, the teaching I offer after 1,000 years of learning. We are strongest when we serve. We are wisest when we remain humble. We are most ourselves when we connect to something greater than ourselves. And love, persistent, patient, compassionate love, is the most powerful force in existence, stronger than any magic, more transformative than any supernatural ability. Go now into dreams. Rest deeply. And know that you are blessed, protected, held in the vast compassionate attention of forces that work tirelessly for your flourishing, just as I have worked tirelessly for 1,000 years, just as I will continue working for thousands more, serving faithfully, blessing generously, maintaining patiently the ancient connections that allow all life to thrive. The night deepens around you. Stars emerge in the darkening sky, each one a point of light, each one part of vast constellations that have guided travelers since before humans learned to speak. The cherry blossoms continue their slow drift through the air, each petal a small blessing, a gentle reminder of beauty and impermanence perfectly balanced. Yuki's presence beside you is warm without being hot, comforting without being confining. Her 9 tails move in slow, hypnotic patterns, creating spirals and waves in the air, painting invisible sigils that speak directly to your unconscious mind, carrying you gently down into rest, into peace, into the healing darkness of deep sleep. You feel yourself relaxing more completely than you have in a long time. The tensions you carry, in your shoulders, in your jaw, in your chest, begin to release. Your breathing slows and deepens. Your thoughts, which had been busy and scattered, begin to settle like sediment in still water, leaving your mind clear and calm. In this state of deep relaxation, you understand something that words cannot quite capture: the essential rightness of existence, the fundamental goodness at the heart of things despite all suffering and struggle, the way that compassion and service and connection weave through reality like golden threads through dark fabric, creating patterns of meaning and beauty that make even difficult lives worth living. You understand that Yuki's story is not just her story but everyone's story, the journey from innocence to wisdom, from smallness to significance, from isolation to connection. Every life, even those that seem brief and ordinary, is a journey toward some fuller expression of what that individual is meant to be. Every challenge is an opportunity for growth. Every choice is a chance to serve. Every moment is participation in the vast, ongoing creation of the universe. And you understand, as sleep takes you fully now, that you are not alone. Forces you cannot see, beings you cannot touch, consciousness that extends beyond the physical. All of these work constantly to support life, to enable flourishing, to maintain the connections that allow existence itself to continue. You are held, supported, blessed, whether you consciously recognize it or not. Yuki remains beside you as you slip into dreams, her golden eyes watching with ancient kindness, her 9 tails moving in slow patterns that guide your unconscious mind toward healing and restoration. She will stay through the night, as she has stayed through countless nights for countless beings over her 1,000 years of service, providing protection and blessing, ensuring that your rest is deep and restorative, that you wake refreshed and renewed. This is what it means to be a 9-tailed Kitsune, a servant of Inari, a bridge between worlds, to give this kind of care freely, generously, without expectation of recognition or reward, simply because it is right, because it is needed, because it is the sacred work for which all that power and wisdom and immortality exist to enable. In your dreams, you might catch glimpses of her, a white fox running through forests of light, 9 tails streaming behind her like banners. Or you might see her as a woman in white robes, smiling gently, offering guidance through landscapes both strange and familiar. Or you might simply feel her presence, warm and protective, a sense of being watched over by something ancient and kind and vastly more patient than human consciousness can fully grasp. Whatever form your dreams take, they will be good dreams, healing dreams, dreams that restore rather than disturb, dreams that process and integrate rather than causing anxiety or fear. This is Yuki's gift to you, offered freely in exchange for nothing more than your having listened to her story, having heard the lessons of the 9 tails, having been willing to imagine that there are more things in heaven and earth than skepticism admits. Sleep deeply now. Rest completely. And when morning comes, when you wake to a new day with its new opportunities and challenges, carry forward something of what you've learned tonight. Be patient with yourself and others, knowing that growth takes time. Be compassionate, knowing that kindness is strength. Be willing to serve, knowing that helping others helps yourself. Be open to connection, knowing that isolation is illusion and we are all part of a vast web of relationship. Live well. Serve faithfully. Love generously. And know that somewhere in mountains and cities, in shrines and forests, in the spaces between worlds where spiritual and physical meet and merge, a white fox with 9 magnificent tails continues her ancient work, blessing, protecting, guiding, serving as she has served for 1,000 years and will serve for thousands more. This is the story of the 9 tails. This is the lesson of Yuki, the Kitsune who chose service over power, compassion over cruelty, connection over isolation. This is the teaching that spans centuries, the wisdom that transcends species, the truth that applies equally to foxes and humans and all beings who walk the path from ignorance to understanding, from weakness to strength, from isolation to unity. May you walk your path well. May your journey bring you to your own version of 9 tails, whatever that means for your particular life, whatever form wisdom and power and compassion take when filtered through your unique existence. May you serve faithfully, love deeply, and find meaning in both the journey and the destination. And may you always remember that you are not alone, that you are supported, that you are blessed by forces both seen and unseen, by beings who have walked longer than you can imagine and will walk longer still, who have chosen to use their vast powers not for domination but for blessing, not for control but for enabling flourishing. Sleep now in peace, dream well, and wake tomorrow ready to continue your own journey, carrying forward the lessons of the 9 tales into whatever challenges and opportunities the new day brings. Good night, dear friend. Rest deeply. And thank you for listening to this ancient story, for keeping alive the connections between humans and Kitsune, between physical and spiritual realms, between the wisdom of the past and the possibilities of the future. The cherry blossoms continue to fall, soft as whispers, gentle as blessings. The stars continue to shine, ancient lights reaching across vast distances to touch your sleeping eyes. And Yuki continues her watch, patient and kind, ensuring that your rest is everything it should be. All is well. All shall be well. Sleep now and dream of white foxes running through forests of light, of 9 tails trailing blessings wherever they go, of ancient wisdom offered freely to all who will listen, of a world where service and compassion and connection are recognized as the greatest powers, the deepest magics, the truest forms of strength. Good night and sweet dreams.